The Lord be with you.
With your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to St. Matthew. On that day, Jesus went out of the house and sat down by the sea. Such large crowds gathered around him that he got into a boat and sat down, and the whole crowd stood along the shore. And he spoke to them at length in parables. A sower went out to sow, and he sowed. Some seeds fell in the path, and the birds came and ate it up. Some fell on rocky grounds, where it had little soil. It sprang up, and because the soil was not deep, and when the sun rose, it scorched, and it withered for lack of roots. Some seeds fell among thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked it. But some seeds fell on rich soil and produced fruit, 100 or 60 or 30-fold. Whoever has ears ought to hear. The Gospel of the Lord.
Good morning. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Father John Salatino. I was parochial vicar here in St. Mary's for 9 years with Father Tony, Father Ken, and Father Brian. And it's always wonderful to come back to St. Mary's. I'm here this morning because as of last year, Bishop Rosansky allowed me to join the Missionary Society of St. James the Apostle. And so now I'm working in a parish just outside of Lima, Peru. And today I'll talk a little bit about that parish. Something happened during the week that reminded me of when I was going to college here at Westfield State. I got a degree in Spanish, which came in handy when I was here at St. Mary's and when I was up at St. Mark's in Pittsfield, and comes in very handy now that I'm in Peru. In my last semester at Westfield State, I went to Mexico City to study at the National University of Mexico City. And while I was there, it was June 4th, 1989. And at night I would listen to the station that had American news on the radio. And I remember that night because they were describing the massacre in Tiananmen Square. And I always remember the date because 6 years later, that would be the date of my ordination. This past week, one of the organizers of the protest of the Tiananmen Square uprising died, Louis Xiaopao. Louis was 33 years old in 1989, and for a few days, it looked like the students and these young people were going to make a difference. They were protesting for human rights, for human dignity. They were protesting for justice in a country that was lacking so many things. And for a while, it looked like they were going to make a difference. And then literally the tanks rolled out and the bullets flew. He was arrested with many of the other organizers of the demonstration. And for the past almost 30 years, he was in and out of prison. He spent the last 8 years in prison. He was released just this week in the latter stages of cancer, and he died. While he was in prison, he received the Nobel Prize for Peace. Hopefully, when Louis died, he didn't think that his life was a failure. He wasn't able to make the changes that he and his fellow organizers tried to make. But at least they made a stand and they planted the seeds. In the gospel today, Jesus tells the parable of the sower of the seeds. And some of it falls on rocky ground, some of it falls amongst the thorns, and some of it falls in good ground and takes root and sprouts and produces so much fruit. We're called as Christians to produce fruit, to be known by our good works, but we do these things not to buy our way into heaven. We're not good people so we can get to heaven and be with God. God is with us right now. He never leaves us alone. He's always with us. But we should do good things. We should be good people because we should be very much aware of how much God loves us. We should be aware of the price that Jesus paid for our salvation. We should be mindful as Catholics that we receive the very presence of Jesus in the Eucharist, that we've received the sacraments, and the Holy Spirit dwells within our soul and we're united to God. This is why we should try to do what is right and what's good, and that we should nurture our faith that is a gift from God. Now, I've had the opportunity since last year to go down to work with the Society of St. James the Apostle. It was started in almost 60 years ago. We'll be celebrating our 60th anniversary in January. And it was started by Cardinal Cushing in Boston, who was a good friend of Pope John the 23rd. In the 50s and 60s, there was a shortage of priests in Latin America. And North America had a surplus of priests. So the Holy Father asked Cardinal Cushing if he could lend a hand, if he could do something. So he founded the St. James Society. It's made up of diocesan priests from English-speaking countries, and it's a kind of a lend-lease type program. I'm going down for 5 years. Bishop Rosansky lent me out for 5 years, and when the 5 years are up, I'll come back to the diocese. And a lot of guys over the past 60 years have done that. There's been a number of priests who have gone down and stayed their entire priesthood. They've been down there for 20, 30, 40, some 50 years. And what we do is we go into the very poorest neighborhoods, and we start parishes from scratch. And then after a number of years, when everything is up and running and everything functions, we give that parish, we entrust it to the local bishop, who brings in Peruvian priests, and we move on to another place. So I'm presently in our newest parish. It's only 10 years old. It's in the valley of Ate Vitarte, on the western edge of Lima. We'd consider it to be a slum by our standards, but there's running water and paved roads. There's electricity most of the time. The people there work very hard. God is very providential, so if those of you who remember me, you know I'm not a morning person. I always said if God wanted morning masses, Jesus would have had the last breakfast and not the last supper. And where I live in Ate Vitarte, one of the miseries of Lima, it's a city, it was built for 2 million people, but now there's 12 million people there. There was a civil war in the 80s and 90s, and people came in from the countryside looking for refuge. So now the city is just choked with people. It's chaotic. And it takes hours and hours just to commute less than 10 miles. So the people in my parish, they get up before 5 a.m., and they're on the road. It takes 3 hours sometimes. And they'll work 8-9 hours, and then they have to commute 3 hours back. So in our parish, the parish office opens at 4 p.m. Daily Mass is at 7 p.m. All the meetings take place before and after Mass. We're working from 4 to 11, basically. There's a few things that happen during the day, but mostly the people aren't there. So everything happens at night. The people at Ate Vitarte, where it is, it's not a very pretty place. There are many very beautiful places in Peru, and especially where these people came from, in the mountains and in the jungle, but there's no opportunity there. And 20 years ago, the war was raging. So they all moved into the city, and it's in a desert. It's dusty, it's dirty, it's overcrowded. It's not a very pleasant place. The people work 2 and 3 jobs just to make ends meet, and they still count their pennies. But I'm amazed, even though there's not a lot of money in that parish, there's a lot of faith. Somebody planted good seeds with these people. Because as I said, after working, a lot of these people work 2 and 3 jobs. After working hours and commuting hours, if we have a meeting at night, people are there. We have a religious ed program that has hundreds of children and young people in it, and we never lack for volunteers. And people have a lot of enthusiasm and really want to share their faith. In Lima, because it's so big and so crowded and so chaotic, the whole country has a lot of corruption. You have to have very sharp elbows. People, if they don't know you, they're not even nice to each other. People take advantage of each other, and you can't trust people. But I have a sense that in the parish, people can let down their guard because they're people of faith, and they want to make a difference. They want to make things better for others, and they take solace from being in the presence of people who think like them and believe like them, people that have faith. So seeds were planted, and the fruit is coming to fruition. The harvest is coming. I'm only going to be there 4 more years, so some of the seeds that I plant, I won't see bear fruit. Hopefully I'll hear about it. But it's a wonderful opportunity that I've had in this point of my ministry, after being ordained for 23 years, to be able to go down and to work with these people. This morning, all of you will have an opportunity too. You'll have an opportunity to sow some seeds. Our parish, as I said, it's a very poor neighborhood. We don't have a church like this. We have 5 chapels. The smallest holds 30 people. The largest holds 300. And then we meet in different places for Mass. We celebrate 8 Masses on Sunday. One of the Masses is celebrated in a park. It very rarely rains there. There's 200 people that meet in a park. But behind us is a soccer field where there's always people playing. And to the back of the park is an open-air market, and people are there coming and going, and there's dogs walking through and kids playing. So there's just a lot of noise, but a lot of faith. We meet in homes. We meet in a condominium. We celebrate Mass in a recreation room in a rehabilitation hospital. We go to the different parts of the parish of this long valley with 180,000 people, and we try to celebrate Mass where people can come and where they can get to. We have over 1,200 people that attend Mass on a regular basis. So we have these chapels that we have to maintain. We operate a a soup kitchen for primary and middle school children. 10 years ago, after the war, there wasn't a lot of food, and there were 5 of these soup kitchens in the parish. Things are getting better, but there's still a need. There's a lot of single parents, a lot of single mothers, unfortunately, and there's no social help. There's no help from the government. So this makes a difference in the lives of some children and their families. They didn't have this food, they'd go to school hungry. We have a social worker who's like a pastoral minister, but she has degrees and credentials, which is key into opening the bureaucracy of the healthcare system. They have universal healthcare supposedly, but the system is Byzantine. And if you have an advocate, you get better service. So she's able to get medicine for people. She's able to get them into hospitals. And the society pays for her salary, a full-time salary. She'll be retiring in August, and we're going to hire a part-time social worker and a part-time youth minister. There was a baby boom about 10 years ago, and it's still going on. So there's a lot of 20-somethings and a lot of teenagers who have fallen through the cracks, and they're in the streets, basically. So we're going to start ministering to them. The pastor is from the Philippines. The retired pastor is still with us. He comes out on the weekends. He's from Ireland. And there's a religious order priest from Argentina who lives in our parish who helps out. So we have a couple of Spanish nuns that work with us too, Spanish Dominicans, who've been there for years. So I work with a wonderful team of people. And it's even though it's a climate that I don't like, even though it's dirty and dusty and sometimes dangerous, I enjoy being there because of the faith of the people and their gratitude. So today, on behalf of the people of my parish, of our risen Lord in the valley of Atebitarte, I thank you for your help, for all that you can do. Today you have an opportunity to plant some seeds. You're not going to know what becomes of the help that you give today, but as people have faith, you'll know that it'll bear fruit. Let us stand and pray.